Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I am finishing up my top 50 games of all time with the big one, the top 10. Numbers 1 through 10. This is it. We finally made it. Now I'm willing to bet a bunch of you have jumped straight to this list, skipping over the other 4 videos. I implore you to go check those ones out because those 40 games are amazing. They are fantastic. Some of them have even been in my top 10 in the past. But let's not delay any longer. Let's just get right into it with my number 10, A Feast for Odin. For me, this game is the culmination of all of Uwe Rosenberg's prior games. We got all of his polyomino games in here. We have a bunch of his worker placement ideas. We have some of the resource conversion, some of the card play. To me, it just takes everything in his catalog, a true magnum opus. Mechanically, you have a bunch of workers and you have a board filled with a ton of worker placement spots. It's incredibly overwhelming at first until you realize that these worker placement spots are grouped into similar categories, and they have rows. So the first row of worker placement spots only requires 1 worker, but the second row requires 2, 3, and then 4. So the more workers you spend to go to some of these better worker placement spots, the more you can do. And there's a ton of stuff you can do. You can go hunting, you can go fishing and whaling, you can build buildings, you can get animals, you can do farming or various other resource gathering, you can go out in ships and plunder. But all of it just is different ways of getting these different polyomino shapes of different sizes and different colors. And you're going to be placing them on your board, puzzling out how to fit them all together in specific ways in order to try to cover up all these negative point spots on your board. Doing this is also giving you income. And there's certain rules about which colors you can put together. You're also using the food resources to feed your workers. And you keep doing this, building up and building up, covering more and more spaces. And at the beginning, it feels like there's no way I'm ever going to be able to fill everything up. I'm going to have all these negative points. But by the end, it always seems like you found a way to get enough stuff to figure out how to piece it all together. This is a big game. It takes a while to set it all up on the table, but it is so worth it. That's my number 10, A Feast for Odin. Number 9 is Dungeon Petz. I did a video, my top 10 favorite worker placement games of all time, and in that video I discussed at length this brilliant worker placement mechanism where you have a bunch of workers, these are imps that are working for you, and simultaneously and in secret all players group their imps together. And then you reveal, and the strongest groups go first. So you could build a few really strong groups, or you could have many weaker groups and do more actions. It is such a brilliant worker placement idea. But what I really want to talk about with Dungeon Petz is the theme. In this game, the players are pet store owners, but for these little monsters. And so you're building cages and you're buying these monsters, putting them in the cage, and trying to meet their needs. And you have to do all sorts of things. You have to feed them. You have to play with them. You have to deal with their anger or their magical outbursts. They'll poop in the cages and you have to deal with that because that might cause them to get sick. And if you don't meet their needs properly, they're going to get suffering or they may escape altogether. And if you do a good job of taking care of them, then you'll score highly in these different exhibitions that the town puts on. And ultimately, you want to keep them till they get older so you can sell them to these dungeon lords that are looking for monsters to be a part of their dungeon. It's a great theme, but what this game does so brilliantly is how it brings those pets to life. And it's done with such a simple card mechanic. You have these 4 decks of cards, and each one vaguely relates to a different thing. So green is like feeding. Red is anger, purple is magic, and yellow is play. And half of the cards in those decks have that symbol on it, have that corresponding symbol. But the other half of those decks have different symbols. So for instance, in the green deck, there's a ton of poop symbols. And each deck has a different distribution of these symbols. Well, each pet is going to force you to draw from certain decks and then play certain cards, which are going to define their needs that you're then going to have to take care of. The result of all this is not only are each of the pets unique, but because you don't exactly know what's going to come out of those decks, they feel a little bit unpredictable, a little bit alive. And because of that, you become attached to them. You don't want them to suffer. You want to be able to meet their needs. And very few medium weight Euros evoke this much theme. I just think this game is so filled with joy. I think it's a truly special game. And that's why it's my number 9 Dungeon Petz. My number 8 is Doomtown Reloaded. Speaking of great themes, this is my favorite theme in all of board gaming. This is the Weird West. We're talking about the Wild West, but we have magic and we have advanced technology. We even have miracles to go along with our shootouts. And each player is playing a different faction. So you might be the sheriff, right? The law, or you might be a group of bandits. Or maybe you're an evil corporation with a bunch of mad scientists creating weird technologies. Or maybe you're a group of circus freaks that have strange powers and can cast creepy spells on people. Oh, the theme is just so amazing. And the game itself is a 2-player collectible card game, only it's not collectible at all. This really doesn't feel like your traditional collectible card game because there's such a strong spatial component. You're going to be playing cards to sort of build out your posse and outfit them with different weapons or spells or crazy stuff like flamethrowers or jetpacks or mechanical horses. But you're also going to be playing these locations out into town, expanding the board essentially. And you're going to be moving your characters to these different locations, trying to control them. Strategically moving about town and positioning your characters in the right spots is a big part of the game. And sometimes you're going to have to move your characters in where your opponent is and have a shootout. And this is a great part of the game because the cards that you have are multi-use. Each card also corresponds to just a regular number and suit like you'd find in a regular deck of cards. And when you have shootouts or sometimes when you're resolving other effects in the game, you're going to be playing poker hands. It actually makes deck construction at the beginning of the game so much more interesting because you can stack your deck with like a bunch of kings and a bunch of aces so that it'll be really good during these moments when you're playing poker. There's even this great cheating system where you can have 5 of a kind or something like that. And that's legitimate as long as your opponent doesn't play a cheating effect where they get some sort of special ability if you cheat. So you're doing a little push your luck along with the poker. It's an absolute blast, and the best part is just how cinematic it all feels. There are so many characters in this game, so many unique personalities that really shine through in these cards. And you really get this like great sci-fi western story playing out on the table. You can really see it. It's not abstract at all. You walk into a bar, your character has a gun, they confront some other character, they have a shootout. It really feels like a movie. This game has died and been reborn and then died and been reborn again, but it's still around. You can still find it, and I highly recommend you check it out. It's my number 8. That is Doomtown Reloaded. My number 7 is Pax Pamir 2nd Edition. In this game, we play Afghan leaders in the 19th century who are trying to manipulate the European superpowers in the region for our own purposes. It's a bit of history that I'm really not familiar with at all, and honestly, this game is unlike any other game I've ever played. It's a tableau builder of sorts. You are drafting cards from a central market, and these cards give you actions that you can take, like building units in various regions or moving those units around and attacking. The interesting thing is you don't own any of those units. You are just allied with one of the superpowers, and you can switch alliances in this game. And really, you're just trying to be allied with the dominant power when one of these dominance check cards come out of the deck. If you have the most influence with the current dominant coalition, then you'll get a bunch of victory points. But often, one of the coalitions doesn't have a dominating lead on the board, and in that case, you score based on your own personal power that you've built up. Timing is critical. You really want to make sure you strike at exactly the right time, be in the lead right when that card comes out and gets purchased. It's a very interesting feel because you don't have that much power. There's not that much that you can do, especially in like a 5-player game. So it's all about slightly, subtly positioning yourself. I just find it to be a fascinating game that is seriously unlike anything else I've ever played. And the production is just amazing with this cloth mat and these pieces and the metal coins. It all just comes together. So there you have it. That's my number 7 PAX Pamir 2nd edition. Number 6 is Kanban EV. Now, there's been a lot of Vital Lacerda games on this list, but Kanban is my favorite right now. Like his other games, we have a very thematic, heavy Euro game. This time, it's really about office politics. This is about trying to get an edge on your coworkers and impress your ruthless boss who is constantly judging your work. I mean, a big part of this game is training, studying, going to meetings to brag about the things that you've done. And yes, you work in a car factory. You are, designing cars, improving them, and then testing those designs. But really, the game could take place in any office, anywhere. And I just love that. I love this theme so much. This is a worker placement game where you have one worker, and there's this central column of actions that you can take. Everyone sort of picks an action, and then you resolve them from top to bottom. Then, once everyone has taken their actions, you go back to the top, and in order, you move to a new location. And of course, you can't go somewhere where someone else already is. This makes for an incredibly tight game where people are constantly getting in your way and you're trying to figure out how to position yourself in order to get to the place where you want to go. It's this worker placement dance, and it's made all the more fascinating by the fact that your boss, Sandra in this game, is also a pawn, also a worker out there moving to different spots, and potentially taking points away from you if you haven't done the things that she wants you to do in the various different departments. If you want to see what I'm talking about, I've done a full solo playthrough of this game. Go check that out to see exactly how that works. It works great as a solo game, and really it works great at every player count. With fewer players, there's sort of more restrictions about where you can go, so it keeps it nice and tight and full of angst. I really love the decisions in this one, and combined with this fantastic theme, it just puts it over the top for me. And that's why it's my number 6 favorite game of all time. That is Kanban EV. Number 5 is Great Western Trail. This is another one where I did a full solo playthrough, so you can go check that out. The solo game plays very similarly to the multiplayer game. I actually prefer this one at 2 or maybe 3 players. This is a deck building game where you have this starting deck of like really kind of pathetic cows of a bunch of different types. I can't remember their names, but you just think of them in terms of colors. You have some gray cows, white, green, black, and they have a value of like 1 or 2. And you draw a hand of 4 cards, and you are essentially herding these cows down this trail, the Great Western Trail, moving from house to house, location to location. So on your turn, you can just basically move 1 to 3 spaces, and wherever you stop, you can do the action that's on that house. And the actions might let you buy additional better cows, because there are 3 value and 4 value and 5 value cows. Or maybe build additional buildings out on the trail, which give you different actions. Or maybe move this train token forward, which is basically symbolizing like your economy. Or maybe hire these workers that will help you when you take these different actions, give you various bonuses. And at most of these locations, you are able to spend some of the cows from your hand in order to get money. And then At the end of your turn, you draw back up to 4 cards. The reason you're doing all that is because once you reach the end of the trail, you're going to get to sell the cows that are in your hand. And you want to have the most value there. But the trick is you can only count each type of cow once. So ideally, you want a handful of all different cows, as valuable as they can be. Once you do that, you go back to the beginning of the trail, you keep moving back up the trail, and each time you want to get higher and higher values of herds of cows in your hand. So essentially, as you're moving down the trail, you are tuning your hand, trying to get the perfect hand for when you get to the end. It's a really great, cool system because you have various ways of cycling through your deck or thinning your deck so you can get to those better cows, just like in a lot of deck building games. You also have ways of getting more cards in your hand so you can have a max hand size of 5 or even 6. It's an incredibly satisfying game. It feels so great to create that perfect hand right as you're getting to the end of the line and sell it for a big payout. And there's a ton of different strategies and avenues that you can pursue. You could go heavy into the building and build all these buildings because you're going to get points for those. You can focus on moving your train token as far down the track as possible, which can give you massive amounts of money. Or you could get a bunch of cowboys and just load up, get all the cows, because each of those better cows is giving you points. There's objective cards that you can use to get points. There's just all sorts of different things. I'm a big fan of games that let you really focus hard on one single strategy, and games that have multiple paths to victory. And this is definitely one of those. Each time I play, I try something a little bit different than I tried the time before. And I just absolutely love it. This is such a great Euro game. You should definitely check this one out. It's my number 5, Great Western Trail. Number 4 is Galaxy Trucker. I can already hear some of you hitting the unsubscribe button. Galaxy Trucker is probably the most controversial game that I've ever run across. People either love it or hate it. Well, put me in the absolute love it category. And it surprises even me how much I love this game. This is a real-time tile laying game. And I don't have any other real-time games on this list or even my top 100, maybe my top 500. I do not like real-time strategy games. I'm not talking about dexterity games like Classic. I mean strategy games where you're timed and you have to do things quickly. I hate that. Except for in Galaxy Trucker. So what you're doing is you're building a spaceship kind of out of junk parts. And in the middle of the table, you have a bunch of face-down tiles. And you start the timer and everyone using one hand grabs a piece. And then you start to build out your spaceship, connecting pieces together, and you have all sorts of different parts. You have lasers, you have rockets, you have sleeping quarters for crew, you have cargo holds, you have shields, you even have places where you can hold these alien passengers that give you a little boost, and you have these battery compartments that can, charge various different parts of your ship. So you're trying to create a good balance of things. But you're never going to be able to build it all. Your ship is supposed to be terrible. That's the trick. You're not supposed to be able to do this well because you're going fast. You're supposed to just do the best you can, and in the end, you're going to have a kind of crappy, barely functional ship. Then you go to the second phase of the game, where everyone is going to take their ship, and you're going to fly it out into space looking for goods to put on your ship and take home to get money, which is points. But you have this event deck and you're going to flip it over and you might find planets with goods on them, but you also might find pirates that are going to attack your ship. You might have open space where you need to fire up your rockets in order to get through. And you might run across asteroids that are going to attack your ship, hit you from various sides. And you're going to roll a die to get a random space that it hits and possibly destroy parts of your ship. And if you don't build your ship right, that might cause other pieces to fall off as well. And you might have this catastrophic situation where half your ship just falls off. It's incredibly silly fun. And whether or not you're going to like this game is whether you can laugh at the destruction, not just of other players' ship, but yours as well. Because that's really the point. That's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to barely survive, eke out like, just a little bit of money. There is no board game that has made me laugh as much as this game. If this had been around when I was a young teen or something, I would have played the heck out of this game with my friends, and we would have had a blast. I think that's why this one appeals to me so much. It just is one of the board games that I just think is the most pure fun. And that's why Galaxy Trucker is my number 4 game of all time. My number 3 is Gloomhaven. This, I think, is a much less controversial pick. Gloomhaven is an incredibly popular dungeon crawl with an epic campaign, and it features a unique card system for its combat. You play as a character with its own unique deck of cards, small deck of cards, and each of these cards has a top action and a bottom action. And on your turn, you're going to be playing 2 cards, and use one of them for the top action, one for the bottom. And these actions involve everything from moving to attacking, using special types of attack or healing, blocking all sorts of stuff. And some of the effects are actually one-time use. They're so powerful that you just use them once and then the card is gone. You don't just discard it, you sort of remove it from that particular battle. And your cards are also your sort of stamina. And so as you use these cards, you discard them. Then when you run out of cards, you have to do a little short rest to get your cards that you've discarded back. But when you do that, you have to remove one. So as you're cycling through your deck, you're constantly losing cards, getting weaker and weaker, which basically means there's a timer for every one of these little mini scenarios, these little mini dungeon runs. You need to complete the objective quickly before you run out of cards or run out of stamina. You also have health, so as the enemies are attacking you, you're also losing health at the same time, and you could die that way as well. So it's a really tricky puzzle. It's like a efficiency puzzle where you really need to figure out how to best use your cards at the exact appropriate time and really have strong teamwork with the other players. It makes for a much more thinky and puzzly experience than you typically get from a lot of dungeon crawlers where, mostly combat is just resolved through rolling dice. And that's definitely what appeals to me here. I am addicted to this card system, as well as all the progression where you get to upgrade these cards as you go along, as your character gets more experience. You also get different items and do all of that good dungeon crawly stuff. I think the story in the world is also very interesting. The characters feel very unique, and the game really provides an opportunity for you to do some clever plays. And that always feels fantastic. It's easy to see why this is one of the most popular board games of all time. I'm right along in there with everybody else. There's not much more you can say about this game. That's my number 3, Gloomhaven. My number 2 is Robinson Crusoe: Adventures on the Cursed Island. If you follow the channel, this is of no surprise. I've made it very clear that this is my favorite solo and my favorite cooperative game of all time. And this game does something that I think no other game can do. It can tell a compelling adventure survival story without the need of a storybook. Unlike games like This War of Mine and Sleeping Gods, here the story emerges out of the gameplay without having to read long passages and things like that. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, I've done a full playthrough of this one. Go check that out because you'll see this emergent story. And it's incredible. Doomtown Reloaded comes close to doing something like this, but Robinson Crusoe just does it the best, and it does it consistently with every play. Now, it achieves this because of 2 things. One, there is this terrific event system in this game where you'll draw an event card, and it will oftentimes have a top and a bottom. And if you're playing correctly, even though it's not necessarily in the rule book, you never want to look at that bottom part. You just want to look at the top part of the event. And a lot of times it's going to, a little something's going to happen and you're going to have a choice. And oftentimes the choice will involve maybe ignoring something or doing something, but you have to place the event card back into the event deck. And then when it comes up again, you're going to read that bottom part of the card and something's going to happen. It means that choices that you make at the beginning of the game will come back and maybe haunt you later in the game, usually haunt you. And that is so terrific. That is how you tell a story. Seriously, if you haven't seen it, watch the playthrough. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The other thing that Robinson Crusoe does that is so great is that it's not just a game, it's like a game system because you're going to play out one of these scenarios. The base game comes with 6 scenarios, I think, and then there's just a bunch of other scenarios you can get. And each one is very different. It uses the same base rules, but it adds all these different little elements to set up a different story. You're usually trying to escape the island, but one of the scenarios has you deciding to try to make a life on the island, build up and be secure, start a family there. That radically changes the game. It changes the story that emerges. And it means that it's just a game that has infinite replayability. This game gets a bad reputation for being like super punishing and impossibly hard. But once you get to know it a little bit and you figure out a few tricks, it becomes a fair, hard co-op. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. I don't want my co-ops to be easy. This is such a special design. And that's why it's my number 2 best board game of all time. And my number 1 is Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. If you're keeping track, that makes 3 Vlaada Chvátil games on my top 10 alone. Yeah, he is absolutely my favorite designer, and we talked about magnum opuses before with A Feast for Odin. Well, the same thing holds true here. This is an epic civilization building game where you're going to span the ages from antiquity all the way to modern times. It's got everything that you would expect from a civilization game. You have wars, you have exploration, you have technologies, governments, leaders. You're building all sorts of buildings. You have workers. You're dealing with your citizens' happiness, managing food and resources, building great wonders, and colonizing distant lands. The only thing this game doesn't have is a map. No little pieces moving around a map. All that is gone. And what you have is just a card game. One of the most brilliantly designed card games of all time. It uses an action point system, and at its heart, it's a drafting game where you have a long river of cards in the center of the table, and you are spending action points to take those cards into your hand. You're also spending those action points to play the cards out onto the table. You're using food to get workers that you then put on the buildings in your tableau to produce the various resources. Maybe it's science that you have to spend in order to play out the cards. Maybe it's culture, which is basically just victory points. And you have a ton of different cards that you're going to be playing. There are wonders of the world. There are different leaders, and you can have a different leader in each age that have a special ability that really change up how you want to play that age. You even have cards that let you change up your system of government, which will give you more action points or let you hold more cards in your hand. And then you also have these military cards that have events on it that you seed into an event deck that will eventually come out and cause all these different events to happen. You can build military units, which give you military strength, and you can play these military cards to engage in wars or different battles. There's so much going on, and it is so thinky because you are balancing these different resources. It's like you're spinning plates, and it is almost impossible to be able to keep up with everything. So you always are finding yourself either weak and threaten to be attacked, or you don't have enough science, so you're not getting cards out, or you don't have enough resources to be able to build the things that you need to build, or you're lacking food to be able to increase your population so you can get more stuff done. It is an incredibly tight puzzle. I am not very good at Through the Ages, but I want to be. This is one of the few games that I want to play enough to get really good at it. I want to study it. I want to figure out what makes it tick, because I just think it is such a brilliant design. No other Civilization game that I've played comes close to capturing the feeling that I get when playing this one. And that's why it is my #1 favorite board game of all time. That's Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. So there you go, a mix of some fairly uncontroversial standard picks with a few shockers in there that I'm sure I'm going to hear about. I hope you all enjoyed my top 50 games of all time. Are there any games in your top 50 that I didn't mention? Please write them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.